Good evening, everyone. The first item on our agenda is invocation, and I would ask that you possibly keep in your mind and in your heart Chris Clemens, who the head of our maintenance department's mother is in her most recent difficult time, and every minute's precious, and we don't know where it's going to go, but it doesn't look very good right now. So if you will, keep her in your prayers. And with that, let's take a moment of silence, please. Thank you very, very much. And we'll officially call the meeting to order and say welcome to all of you. Thanks again for being here. And those of you that may be here for the first time, I'll remind you that the rear of the room, my left, there should be a copy of the agenda and other documents that go along with our meeting. And help yourself. If you don't find what you're looking for, raise your hand and I'll try to find what you need. Item number 3 on the agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Number 4 on our proposed agenda is consideration of approving the agenda as presented. Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
I'd like to make a motion to approve the agenda as written.
All right, Mr. Smith made it, and Mr. Brown approved, seconded it. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say no. It's unanimous, Madam Clerk. We're on number 5, the consideration of approval of the minutes for the regular meeting of March the 8th and also for March the 21st. Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes of our regular meeting on March 8th as well as our special meeting on March the 21st.
All right. Again, Mr. Smith and Mr. Brown, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say no. Number 6, public comments on any agenda item. I have a sign-up list here with the name James Bauer. Mr. Bauer, if you would come to the podium, give us your address and so forth, and speak to an item on the agenda, please.
James Bauer, 329 Ocean Boulevard West, and it concerns a pier purchase, the cost regarding it. When are we going to find out as a community what insurance must have already gotten for the pier, what it's going to cover, what are the deductibles, and what's the total yearly cost? Thank you.
Mr. Hewitt, you have anything you want to say to that, or we'll just take that in advisement?
I think that the board's rules are that you receive comments.
That's correct. All right, and that's the only one that signed up. Is that correct, Madam Clerk?
Yes, sir.
Thank you, and we will proceed to get your answers to you, sir. We'll follow our procedures, and we'll get back to you. Police report, Chief Dixon.
Good evening. Don't have a lot to mention on the police report as far as the numbers go. If the board has questions, I'll answer those. If not, I'll go on a couple of public service announcements aside from just that. Questions, comments, or concerns on any of the numbers specifically?
No, I just was looking at the alarm numbers, 11. Are those false alarms or are those alarms that actually had issues going on?
I don't recall any of them specifically being anything major. So without going through them individually, I don't remember any of them being an incident. Just some things I'll mention for everybody for what's happened and what's going on is April, which we're still currently in, is the National Distracted Driver Awareness Month. So we've been working with the Governor's Highway Safety Program, which we routinely do, trying to educate. And I know there was a few people who noticed the checking station that was going on Thursday night. And so we're trying to get out and educate people and let them know what's going on. We're trying to be proactive in our approach about that. Next month is Motorcycle Safety Awareness Month, part of Governor's Highway Safety, so expect to continue to see us out and about as we're trying to encourage traffic safety. Also, this coming weekend, backing up a little bit, but this coming weekend is the Festival by the Sea. I know everybody knows that's coming up.
Days at the dock.
Or, yeah, excuse me, Days at the Dock. You're exactly right. The weather is supposed to be in the 70s and mostly sunny. And the Merchants Association, I'll get a little plug in here. The Merchants Association has been working to work on some donations for us and the fire department. So this weekend, all the proceeds from the dunking booth are supposed to go back to the police department on Saturday. And on Sunday, all the proceeds from the dunking booth are supposed to go to Tri-Beach Fire Department. So we ask you to come out to the festival, dunk a police officer, dunk a firefighter, and the money's going back to a good cause.
I hope it's heated water.
Not from what I've been told, and I'm going to get in there. So if you want to dunk the chief, please come out. I'm going to volunteer. I'm going to get in there, and I'm going to take the dunk. So if you want to dunk the chief, please come on out.
Do we have any plans to possibly, what we can do to help improve golf cart safety on the island? They're here, and they seem to be everywhere. I went to a breakfast this morning and coming back, and one come around the garbage truck, and the car in front of me had to go up on the sidewalk to keep from hitting them head on. So is there anything in the works on the...
So we're working on trying to get that education out there too. We've actually, in connection with the Governor's Highway Safety Program, we've got what's called a seatbelt convincer, and it's going to be down here at the festival. So what this is it's basically a trailer you pull behind. I don't know how many people have seen it, but it's called a seatbelt convincer, and it simulates a low-speed collision. And it's something you can actually get in, put your seatbelt on, and put you in a low-speed collision so you can actually feel the impact of what it does. So that's something we're trying to get down here to encourage seatbelt safety. We're trying to do a lot of education this year and get the message out there.
Thank you, Jeremy.
Yes, sir. Thank y'all for everything.
Thank you, sir.
Good job, Chief.
Mr. Hewitt, number 8, paid parking.
Yes, sir. The two parking-related items are the proposed ordinance that is at Attachment 1 and the corresponding budget amendment at Attachment 2. The proposed ordinance adds the pier to the designated parking table and amends a couple of oversights found while placing signage for the program. And oh, by the way, Mr. Varner from Auto is here with us tonight. It also adds an exemption that would authorize parking without a permit at the Holden Beach Pavilion during town-sponsored events or rentals of the facility. This exemption is necessary to allow people who are participating in programs such as tie-dye, yoga, and Tai Chi to partake without paying the parking fee. People who pay the fee to rent the pavilion would also be exempted from paying to park. The budget amendment at Attachment 2 is to reduce the programmed parking revenues and expenses previously approved last month that used 3 months instead of 2 months since the program is starting in May instead of April. It also provides for additional program revenues and expenses expected to be generated by the acquisition of the parking lot. A note to the budget amendment that y'all approved last month that had on-street and off-street parking, those were flipped. So what was supposed to be on-street was supposed to be off-street. I've remedied that. This is just a programming adjustment to add the new spaces in at the pier, 80 of them approximately, and to accommodate the 2 months instead of 3 months worth of revenues through the end of the fiscal year. The proposed motion is to adopt the ordinance as revised and also the associated budget amendment. Mr. Varner from Auto has notified me of some potential impacts from people placed in posting rope, which they're allowed to do, that are designated as paid parking spaces by the board. The estimated decrease in total spaces is 10, with a total impact uncertain if provisions of Section 95, Public Right, 05, Public Rights-of-Way are further implemented by property owners. That programmed estimate of 10 shouldn't impact our budget revenues that are in the budget amendment before you.
I have a question. I have absolutely no issue with the addition of the parking being authorized when people are actively participating in town-sponsored recreation programs and rentals. Are they going to have to put a license plate in for the period of time? I mean, how's it going to be controlled? Yeah.
Mr. Varner was provided a list of times that those programs end and days that those rentals are occurring with the spaces that would be involved. And as soon as the program ends, the programs know they have to vacate the area, because immediately upon
Okay.
the time ending, then nobody can park, go to yoga, and then go to the beach.
Thank you. It just was a question. And the other thing, I have two things on the table. One is, there's been a change made on the table. Scotch Bonnet went from east side to west side only, but Scotch Bonnet, the marsh side, is the east side. So I was, isn't...
That's in the delineation area, it's all postponed until after.
No, I understand, because that was my second point, but Scotch Bonnet Drive, the delineated area, is on the east, is on the east side. So when and if and when we have parking there eventually, that's where it would be. However, I also have the concern that at this point, we've said we weren't going to proceed with parking on the marsh sides until delineation and a permission was received, correct?
That's why they asked for.
Right, then I would propose, in order to eliminate any uncertainty, that at this point, they're not going to be there for at least the beginning of the season, take those out of the table. And I would also propose, if we are saying we can't have paid parking there until we get some acceptance or permission, then we should put signs on those streets, no parking at any time, because otherwise there will be parking allowed there after the paid parking hours. And in fact, people are currently parking there. So again, if we have concerns that we should not have parking there, or we're waiting for some official permission to do it, I think we need to make those off limits until things straighten out.
There were 3 cars on Scotch Bonnet when I came to the meeting today, right up in the marsh.
There was a footnote to the table that said to delineate before the number of spots are determined, but leave it on for the document. I believe that was in response to the guidance that we got last month.
Well, I think I'm simply saying at this point in time, I think it's going to cause confusion, and I think not having the streets marked no parking at any time is going to enable parking where we are not sure we should have it. So I'm simply saying I think we need a temporary fix here, that those streets should be marked not for parking until we have everything answered and we have a plan. If we don't sign them, then that means people can park there between 5 at night and 2 in the morning, and from 6 in the morning or 5 in the morning until 9 o'clock. Because that becomes right-of-way that is open.
Scott and I have been conversing a lot about this as Mr. Varner puts his signs in and gets his post in place. And the pier-to-corner signs, you probably have noticed, have been being picked up or moved from the 125 to the 40 foot marker. And a lot of those signs are going to be reusable, but we've been trying to let Mr. Varner get his stuff in place before we go back and look at what needs those no parking markers. So it is a conversation we've been having, and those are certainly areas we would look at.
I would like to propose that before May 1st, we have those Marsh Streets signed, no parking at any time, that's all. I don't know what the rest of the board feels, but that is definitely transition territory right now. And again, if we are not willing to say that it's acceptable for paid parking, I think that we should simply say it's off limits until we get this clarified.
Get the delineation and study complete. I agree with that.
And they should simply then be removed from this table so that there is no question about their status as we go into this.
No parking this side.
Yeah. So I'll make a motion on that if I,
Well, if those are deleted from the table, then that would in effect make those areas no parking.
no, it only makes them no parking from 9 in the morning until 5 in the evening.
Well, I thought the entire table was for the purpose of showing the only places where parking was authorized.
During 9 in the morning till 5 at night for this year. Yes,
It's part of the give back for the side streets,
until we,
being that a side street. After 5 p.m., a property owner on Dolphin Street can park it in the right-of-way in front of their house. But the car has to be gone by 9 a.m. And then when paid parking stops in the fall, they can park there 24/7. That was back 2 months ago, I think, as part of the ordinance.
and that was the concession of, let us try to figure out how we can get this worked out so that there's not a concern about owners parking their own vehicles in the right-of-way adjacent to their home. Okay, so we need, if the Marsh Streets are truly off limits until we get everything defined properly, they should simply be signed. There is no parking at any time going into this season.
I think that's the only way to do it. We delineated the more streets to protect them, and we need to protect them until we figure out where, if and where we have parking spaces.
Whether it can be bulkheaded or gravelled or whatever. Until that point, I think it needs to be no parking.
Just have to close it. I mean, I agree.
Just on
I
that
don't like to do it.
north sides of the road.
Unless we can get the delineation done.
Well, as David said last time, we don't have control over the resources that need to do the next step.
I'm confused because I thought that the table specified the locations, the only places in town that parking was allowed, regardless of what time of day it is.
No, that was changed 2 months ago.
Okay, guess I was.
Not in, I think the right way to answer that maybe be, town manager's correct in his statement. However, an exemption was added at the direction of the board for the side streets to authorize parking.
I think you should show that, you should detail that out, because I don't mean to confuse the issue, but, and maybe I've been too close to it, but I thought that the whole thing about going from 900 down to 500 or 600 was because that you basically had outlawed other locations other than those that were contained in the table. Okay, I stand corrected, it's been pointed out to me. Got it.
So we can get some signage put in that area.
It's Greensboro, Sand Dollar.
That's got enforcement implications. I'd like to ask Mr. Evans's opinion on, on the enforcement implications of putting no parking signs, because it was some time back where he made an excellent statement concerning authorized in some places and not authorized in other places. Do you remember what you said? Because it was pretty succinct.
I don't remember the context. But it's whenever you're doing enforcement of any type, when you should always have what you can do and everything else is what you can't do, or you should have what you can't do and everything else is what you can do. When you start meddling the two with what you can and can't do, then everything in between it becomes a gray area and enforcement becomes almost impossible. It's like any rule that you write or any law you write, you can't have, when you start having exceptions to the rule, then everything in between is an exception. Because when you enforce stuff, I think the attorney will tell you this, if there's any doubt about what your enforcement, then the doubt has to go to the person you're enforcing it on. So it's always a good idea to have what you can do and what you can't do. And as far as having places that are authorized and not authorized, you have to be careful with that.
Well, I'm going to say that we have signs all along Ocean Boulevard, no parking anytime. All I'm saying at this point in time, if our intent is, and it has supposedly been our intent, not to proceed with anything on those marsh streets until it's straightened out, then we need to make those off limits until it's straightened out, and those I think it's 5 streets need to have no parking anytime on that marsh side street until we have a resolution.
Well, I don't know that I would say yes or no to the marsh streets until they're delineated. I think that and the reason being is that if you go all the way back to the parking committees prior to and now, all 3 of them, and there was 3 of them, staff's position on those marsh streets has always been that while they were allowed to be parked there, it was never a good idea to bring attention to parking in those areas because we were not sure what we were parking in. So we were always afraid to say that you could park there or that you couldn't park there. But people parked there. And so once it became delineated, it became important to know whether or not you could park there, and now we're in the process of that.
Correct.
Yeah, so.
So I think what I'm hearing is that the striking of sailfish, swordfish, sand dollar, Scotch bonnet, and Greensboro from the ordinance as proposed is what you're proposing.
Well,
To strike that from the ordinance
I-
under
I-
consideration for
that-
tonight.
I do, but I also believe that we should put no parking at any time on those streets until such a time as this is worked out.
And what I'm trying to get to is that for the
Yeah, for the
purposes of striking,
Yes,
for
just
doing the ordinance to strike those
strike them
5.
for now,
The board
because-
would need to do that and then direct the administrative, the answer to your question is, can we put some signs up there? You betcha, we can do that.
But yes.
But that needs to be, we're just trying to make you aware of the possible ramifications of that. If that's what the board wants us to do, then we'll go out there and sign it, no parking, in those places that we're striking from the ordinance.
But here, and the other thing too, because we had this discussion last time around, like on swordfish, like where the folks are parking right now, on the front close there. I think there's a real good possibility that that's privately owned property. The town does it own, and they're on somebody else's, somebody else's property altogether. So I don't know how you can, what you can do about that. Now, I would think that if the property owners went down there and says, no trespassing, go different story. But can the town go there? I'm just asking.
I don't think you can until the maps.
Well, it's always going to be that what you would be marking is in the right-of-way, as far as no parking.
That's right.
But the people that own property adjacent to the right-of-way are always going to be able to get to their property.
But we don't know what the right-of-way is until the maps come out. Isn't that what you're saying?
But it's not a matter of the right-of-ways, it's a matter of where the wetlands are and delineating factor to the high tide mark. But I have a question about if we're not deciding where parking is and where parking isn't, but we want to go up and put no parking in an area where we're saying that you're not allowed to park, are we saying that you can park everywhere else?
Right.
Because that's what I just said a while ago, when you can't have it, you gotta either do it or you gotta not do it. When you have ordinances and rules, you can't, when I ride down the road, the no parking is designated by no parking and everything else is where I can park.
So if somebody decides to pull into the wetlands, that because it's not designated anything, it's fine. Because this becomes the question of what is protected and what isn't on these
Well,
streets. That's why we're delineating and making a decision.
Well, if we delineate and we find out that those are wetlands, then you will not be able to park in.
Correct.
But right now, we don't know whether you can or you cannot.
But in the past, we have not been in the process of doing anything, and now we are. And when you're in an uncertain position, generally you operate on the
I can assure you
side of
that me,
caution.
as much as me and Rhonda protect the wetlands on this beach, and we do protect them
I know.
viciously, that if we find out that those areas cannot be parked in, then there will be no more parking there. You won't need, you need to put up signs, but there'll be an obvious reason why the sign is there. And you can say no parking because it's wetlands, or something to that effect. But I just don't think that designating those as no parking, then that opens up everything else for parking that doesn't have a sign. I'm just saying, I know what you're trying to, I understand what's being said, but I believe that in the scheme of things, it goes back, no one's ever questioned the parking that went on there because no one ever decided that we should delineate it and then have an explanation mark on where we can put structures or have area at. And it was just right of way. Now we're discussing it. But in the scheme of things, I don't know that it's any different now than it was 2 years ago when people constantly parked there, other than we are delineating it and waiting on the results.
Jim, how will you handle it if somebody's parked on Sailfish between 9 and 5? In the west?
Simply put, I would issue them a parking ticket if they were parked anywhere along those areas.
Because it's not
Because
authorized.
it's not designated.
Right.
It is not a designated area.
So until we get the marshland deal marked, I think you're gonna have to leave it like it is for right now, because there's not gonna be parking between 9 to 5. There's the people that park there now, they're parking there now, so until we can mark what it definitely is, I don't think if you start marking it no parking, then like he said, I mean, some of these places down there that, on the west end, that they're not allowed parking, if you don't put a no parking sign there, they're gonna go park there.
If you create a sign that's no parking wetland delineation in progress, it gives a reason there's no parking. I'm simply stating, I thought the intent was, we don't want parking there at all until it's delineated. It's not just paid parking, it's no parking at all. So, if that's not the case, that somehow it makes a difference if people park after 5 o'clock at night in terms of the concern, that's what it opens it up to. That's what I'm trying to have consistency on the marsh side, where again, we're waiting for delineation to really understand. But if we don't sign it, yes, it will not be public parking, it will not be on the table, so we shouldn't have a lot of traffic. But it will be legal from 5 o'clock in the evening until 2 o'clock in the morning, and then again from, is it 5 or 6 in the morning until 9 in the morning. Because that's how we've got things structured now for this year.
Well, I guess that would be the case until we get delineation, and then we would know. I mean, I don't know how long we're waiting, but
Well, I'll add to that. Mr. Lippard informed me today that the Corps is supposed to be doing site visits for the certification of the delineation the latter part of this week or beginning part of next week. So it's coming. It's pretty close.
and I saw,
Actually, in front of the 800 block
today. Yeah, I saw them working today.
Yeah, they were
Okay.
in front of the 800 block today.
I'm sure it'll take them all week.
Then why don't we just take the side streets out of the table for now? Once we understand what they are, we can put them back in and leave it unsigned.
And what'll happen is when we get the delineation, me and Rhonda, the local LPOs, are gonna give the town the notice that you're not gonna be able to park there anymore, or be able to park there, one or the other.
And correct Scotch Bonnet when we do put it back in, hopefully, that it's the east side. I frequently get my east-west mixed up.
Y'all need to take those things out of the table.
Anything else, Mr. Yip?
Just,
So we need a motion to remove those streets the marsh streets from the table until the maps are complete.
Ms. Pat, you want to make that motion?
Move to remove the marsh streets from the parking map for the ordinance and approve the ordinance number 2208, revenues and appropriation ordinance for fiscal year 2021-22, amendment 13.
Doctor, you want to second it?
Sure.
All right. Any more discussion?
Jim, I think there was a question about Dunescape on the table. Was that straight?
There's still a question on Dunescape south of Mcrae, because owners had put in barriers that prevent us from putting in parking signs for the two low-speed vehicle spaces that are in the table today. So as it stands today, I cannot install those signs.
So those are in the
I
two.
think that was included in Mr. Hewitt's comments earlier, that there's about 10 spaces that are in question right at the moment that require either staff or other action before I can install parking spaces.
So on Dunescape South, you need the staff to remove the railroad ties so you can put the two low speed that we've approved.
That is correct.
We need to talk about that one. Which zone are you talking about, Jim?
H68.
H68. That's two low-speed vehicles
Right.
there.
Two low-speed vehicles
Okay.
on
So-
the west side of
Okay.
Dunescape south of Mcrae.
Right,
And this
but that's what we're talking about. There's a conflict between the property owner's exercise of 9505 that lets them put the post and rope out there and this ordinance, because what,
This is not a post and rope statement.
The stuff that's there is not approved. It's not in compliance with 9505. It can be
This is-
removed.
well, let's talk about that. What is it?
It's the $1.99 fiberglass reflector poles and some of the little round red reflectors, and there's some half rotten railroad ties laying out there. And I mean, it actually looks very horrible.
Well, is it compliant with the ordinance of 9505?
It is not post and rope.
There is some landscaping provisions inside that ordinance, but I don't think the reflectors, the landscaping may qualify under the landscaping.
No, they don't. No, they don't, Tim.
They're not outside the 10 feet.
The board has said before, if things don't comply, they can be removed.
So we just need somebody to remove it?
They need to notify the owner generally, I
Yeah.
believe.
Or have the staff move.
The staff-
Give the owner a chance to move them first, and if they don't, we'll have to. Or they can comply. We'll post the ropes properly
Wait.
installed.
Is there a time frame you need to do that so you can put your spot there, or?
If it's going to be done before May 1st, we have a week and a half.
Well, if it's a non-compliance issue, it's a,
Thank you.
Okay. And then the only other one, the Raleigh Street, the correction, both sides of the street, that's correct? Lumberton, west side only.
Yeah, those have all been corrected.
And Starfish, west side only too, right?
That was a recent change, yes.
Starfish, west side.
That's not in the chart, so you guys would have to make a motion on that one too.
On just that one, and
I would see if you and Commissioner Kukowski would like to, I would just amend the existing.
okay. So I need to make a motion to adjust Starfish, west side only 2 spots. And then Dunescape, to have the non-compliant material removed so he can place the 2 that are approved.
Ms. Pat, do you agree that
I
proposed
agree
amendment?
I agree with that amendment, yes.
All right. Everybody understand the amended motion? Okay. Further discussion? Mr. Hewitt, you got anything else?
no, sir.
You ready to vote? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. It's unanimously passed. Mr. Hewitt, number 9.
Yes, sir. The resolution, this titled Budget Amendment to ratify the pier closing expenses. The resolution authorizing the pier purchase borrowing provided for up to $3.3 million in loan proceeds. The existing budget ordinance identified $3 million in loan proceeds toward the pier purchase. Am I on the right item? Yeah. The actual amount borrowed is $3,057,150, with the increase between the original budget being attributed to the cost of closing. While the authorizing resolution is probably sufficient to increase the amount of loan proceeds in the budget, staff is requesting ratification and approval of the final transactional budget actions to ensure compliance with the Budget Control Act. And that attached budget amendment increases the loan proceeds line by $57,150 and the property acquisition line by $57,150.
Can you people in the back hear? If you cannot hear, raise your hand, and we'll try to make things louder. Okay? Remind everyone to speak loudly and clearly and into the microphone.
I'd like to approve budget ordinance 22-9, amending number 14 for the pier purchase final financing.
Looking for a second.
Second.
Have a first and a second. All in discussion? Hearing no discussion, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say no. It's unanimously passed. Anything else on number 9, Mr. Hewitt?
No, sir.
All right, we're on number 10. Ms. Ferguson, Parks and Rec.
Good evening. I'm going to quickly go through a slideshow that people that came to the public input session saw yesterday, just to bring everybody up to date on what part of is. So this is specifically for the Parks and Recreation Trust Fund grant application. When we talk about what is part of, that is the Parks and Recreation Trust Fund of North Carolina. The purpose of yesterday's session and what's before you tonight is to present the part of project application for 401 Ocean Boulevard West properties. Back in the June timeframe, when the commissioners showed interest in putting in or purchasing the pier, staff went ahead and applied for a waiver from the state. You have to do that if you plan to purchase property. You have to get the consent with the waiver first. Otherwise, if you purchase and you didn't have a waiver, then you're not eligible to apply for grants. It is good through June 13th of 2023. When we closed on March 28th, the very next day, we met with our part of consultant for the region, and we found out that if we put in an application this year, which was a lot of work to try to get ready in a short amount of time, then we would have 2 goes at it. So we have this year. If we get turned down, we still have next year based on our waiver. So that's what we did. Our large grant applications, because this is a $500,000 grant, those are harder to get. So it is not uncommon to get turned down on your first go. So in your packet tonight, and what the public was presented yesterday, is the meat of the application. There are some instructional pages that make the application thicker, and there are some supplements that I'm going to have to attach after tonight if you guys move forward with this as far as minutes and the Parks and Rec master plan. But if you look at the first page in your packet, that's basic facts and assurances. That says who the town manager is, that I would be the contact person for the grant. It outlines the grant amounts, and it says there that you guys have to certify and approve the grant going into the state. Next, they require a description and justification page. While we could probably go on for days about why this is an important project, they look for this to be kept to a one-pager. So basically, it's the meat of why we did what we did. They also require something that's called a site plan that outlines the tracks, and they give very specific guidance on how that is to be laid out. If you turn to your project cost page, you would see there includes the cost. If you look at that 3.5 number, you have to put in that line what the property appraised at, not what you bought it for. So that's why that's there on page 33 of your packet. It also includes the $57,150 for the closing cost. And then you take away what you're asking for in the $500,000 match for Partif. If you turn to page 34, what they're asking you to do at the bottom of that page is to consider any grants for land acquisition that you know that you might apply for, and deduct that from what the town would actually pay if you got all the grants. So on page 34, that's what you see at the bottom. That term bargain sale, I did receive a question on that when it was presented to the Parks and Rec Advisory Board. That is a part of term. That is what they tell you to call that. So that's when the appraised value is higher than what we paid for it, and you account for that there. You have a site vicinity map that they require. You have to list the properties to be acquired with their legal description. And then they ask for something called a conceptual plan, because if you accept money for the state for land acquisition, you are required within 5 years to develop it, which the town plans to do anyway. But you have to put on there any ideas that have been put about as far as what you think you might put there. You don't have to stick to that, but that's what we know as of today, to give them an idea that we're not just buying land and nobody knows what they think they might want to do with it. And then you have a scoring system. This is a competitive process. So points for the system, there are some things we can't get points for anymore, because when we did the development across the street at Bridgeview Park, we got points for our first park. And that's a large point process. But we want to try to get all the other points that we can. So what we did was we presented to 2 community groups, which was the Merchants Association and representatives from the Women's Club. And we also did a required public input meeting yesterday. So typically they have, or this year they know they're going to have $16 to $20 million available, but the flip side to that is that usually they have 10 to 12 solid applications, and because everybody knows the money's available, they're expecting 20 to 25. I got that from our consultant. The points are not everything. Human factor plays into it. Geographical distribution plays into it. There's 4 regions, and all the money for the large grants will not come to the east, just like all the money will not go to the west. So they'll spread it out. There's also trends. So when disc golf came out, disc golf was really hot. If somebody was putting a disc golf course in, they were likely to get some money. Those kinds of things, they factor into it. And how you manage former grants play into it. We have really good grant management for across the street. All of our reports went in on time, and we came in under budget. So in our file, we look really good in that category. But even the highest scoring applications sometimes don't get funded if the commission just decides not to fund them. So those are just the dynamics of the application process. And so yesterday we took public comments. We had about 12 to 15 people here. Some of them were rec board members. We had 2 commissioners. We also had about 8 people to stand up and give comments. It was supposed to be comments, but we got more of the we're not going to take any question sections. The question that came up the most was, what are the strings that you know of? And the specific question is exactly the way I answered it yesterday, but I did check with not 1 but 2 state representatives to make sure of the answer. And I also have a sheet of paper here, but if for some reason the town in the future, 8 years from now, 3 years from now, 20 years from now, it's in perpetuity. If the town ever decides that you are going to sell the property for any reason, that is called convergence, and you have to mitigate if you accept this funding, if you get a grant. So what that means is if the pier property were to appraise in 8 years at $8 million, you would have to pay back, if you decided to sell that property to the state, the value at that time. What they ask you to do first, and the reason they do that is because they're trying to get people not to buy land just to sell it. So the thing that they do first, their priority number 1, is to have you buy another piece of land, similar acreage, similar use on the island or the area for whatever it appraises at, and they bring their own appraiser in. We're not going to do that. There's no way we can accomplish that. So if the town ever did that, the other option that comes down to number 4 on the sheet is that you would have to pay the state back the amount.
And
if
I
you
just want to make sure that we're clear on that. The amount of the appraisal, which is $8 million in your
my scenario.
And also want to point out that in addition, you've taken out a note for 15 years and $3 million, so you'd still be paying on that note. So if you're going to accept, if it's awarded, and I'm sorry for stealing your thunder, but this is finance, if you're going to accept $500,000 and those sentiments were ever carried out, it's going to cost.
The purpose is because it is a Parks and Recreation Trust Fund grant that you're maintaining park property for the public, which is the purpose. So the other side of it is if for some reason everything crashed and it was opposite and it appraised at $1 million, you'd have to pay the highest amount, so you'd pay what we paid for the property. And that's pretty much every land acquisition grant, y'all, with the state. So however you move forward with just this, just know that that's pretty much the language in all of them, especially the feds, except they draw more barriers around theirs.
Why would we buy it to sell it? We bought it for public use.
No, but you never know for 14% of the purchase price, you are basically giving up the land. You can, if there was a decision made, because there was a disaster, this town needed money badly, that is a resource. We would not be able to access it. we would lose the value of it as an asset. In perpetuity is a really, really serious commitment. In perpetuity inland, when there's a forest or a park or something and there's lots of land, is kind of different here. And again, as Christie, we don't have another site to fall back on either. So it wouldn't be that if we decided that this should go, and it would be a hard decision, but it could happen in a future board, that they decide that they want the value out of the site for some reason, legitimate reason, you wouldn't be able to do it. And for less than 15% of a grant that's less than 15% of the value of the property that we just bought. It's not a huge investment by the state.
I think that, I do want to comment on that, and if I'm out of line, I've been known to do that, and y'all have probably developed an affinity for correcting me, but the point that Christie was trying to make is that those strings are on all grants.
Yes.
They're on all grants. So, I mean, this one's 15% of the purchase price, but there's another $500,000 grant next year, or that's coming out soon, that has the potential to provide another $500,000. And then CAMA grants that may come along for public access. They're all going to layer deed restrictions on this property. So if you don't want to pursue grant funding for the property, we'll just step back from pursuing any of them because if the board wants to keep alive the idea on the potential for selling the property, there's no need for us to engage in the grant writing process on it.
Now, development is 25 years with part of. So that's, I think somebody from the podium spoke about that yesterday and started throwing 25 around, but that's strictly, so we had to commit to 25 years on these elements across the street when that grant was passed.
Which is
But
different
properties.
than in perpetuity. It's significantly different than in perpetuity. 25 years. We all know that.
Any more discussion?
It's just pretty scary to, it's not out of the realm with the way things are going that pier property would increase in value. That's the fact. We're not guaranteed the grant. Is there harm in just submitting that? But it's not something we're.
Well, I'll answer that part. The work went into it the last month, so the harm in it is.
Our work did, but not theirs.
Right, you could be looked upon unfavorably if you don't accept it and you get it for future grants, but you definitely will be looked into unfavorably if you were to take the grant and then you have to go through a convergence process. As I understand it, I don't want to say the wrong county, but I think it's Currituck County's going through it right now, and it's messy. But
We certainly, in my opinion, didn't buy it to ever sell. It needs to.
And when the consultant came that day, she said if that's the town's intent and they bought it never to sell, then they should not be scared away by the stipulation. But I do understand the stipulation. That's the answer to the question.
Yeah, stomaching a 25-year is one thing, stomaching a forever is another. Yeah, I agree with you.
Out of order.
Sir,
You are out of order. No, you can comment at the end comment, okay? move that we do not accept the grant, that we do not go forward on this grant.
Motion on the floor. Hearing no second, we'll move on.
In order for the staff to take action, the board is going to have to approve moving forward with the application. Because no action by the board it means that administratively, we don't put the action forward. We don't make the application.
Motion to move forward with the grant application.
Second.
I have a motion to move forward with the grant application. Doctor, you second it?
Yep.
All right, discussion.
I think it's a mistake.
It's scary, that's for sure, but
So again, we worked awful hard to get this pier purchased, taken care of. With the whole intent was to have that not for just the parking. That is going to help us pay for it somewhat. But the main thing was to have some places on this island for our guests to be able to visit the beach. And there's no other place on the beach that's available that would have the amenities that we will be able to have at that location.
There's no question about that. It's the in perpetuity and the fact that if something, and believe me, there are a lot of townspeople who took to heart that, look, if this doesn't work out, we can always sell the land. There are a lot of people on this island that took that to heart as a sort of a, okay, we're okay with it because we can see that. We also, at this point, what is the condition of the pier? Because we still don't know the underwater condition of the pier and just how bad this is, which we did say, and I can say I said it because I wrote the paper with that everybody endorsed, that if we find that that pier is in worse shape than we thought and it needed to be torn down, we would have to re-huddle and come up with what are we going to do now moving forward. So we don't have any report yet on the condition of that pier. My understanding from Christie is this was getting put in to try to give us 2 years chance to get this. So if we don't do it now, we can still do it a year from now, and we reduce down to 1 chance to get it instead of 2. I would not want to move forward on this without having full understanding of the condition of the pier, and I still will have reservations about committing in perpetuity.
Any more discussion?
I just want to say one thing. The grants are an awesome opportunity, and I think if we don't continue to go after them, we're making a mistake there. But this is scary, guys. That's a heavy statement to risk a piece of property. We can't go replace a 350-foot stretch of ocean property anywhere on this island that I know of. We can't go find another property that they're going to even think about accepting, so we would have to mitigate that. That's a real scary thought. And I don't want anybody to interpret what I'm saying is that we bought this pier to sell it for any reason. I'm not saying that at all. I want it to stay there forever, but I think we might need to put the brakes on this. I applaud your hard work, and I understand everything that you're doing, and obviously we'd love to have some help with all the things we are pursuing, but quite frankly, we haven't got it from the county, we haven't got it from the wildlife, we haven't got it from anybody else. So, I mean, we've kind of been on our own with this whole thing. And it's a lot of money, and I would not want to risk it over $500,000. I can't. And I'm on the fence, believe me. I'm a little bit choked up about this, but that's, in my business world, there's no way I would do it if it was my property, and I can't support it either. For that reason, and that reason only. I don't want to sell pier, that better not come out at all, but I just can't. And I don't want it to stop future grants or future possibilities or anything like that, but if the conditions are all the same, if the grant was $3 million, we'd be talking about a whole different animal here. You're talking about $500,000 on what's already a $4.5 million piece of property in my mind. And
But you said if we pull that permit now, our chances of getting other permits are gonna be damaged, right?
No, if we decide not to put this one in, we'll be okay. It's if we were to put it in and either have to, you don't accept it when it comes your way, or especially for one this large, or if we did a convergence. However, I do need some direction if the board's not going to vote for this, because there's the one that's listed on your page to match up with this with land and water conservation is dropping, I think, this week and due in July. So it would have the same stipulations. So if the board's not okay with those, then we don't need to.
That's the access, correct?
Mm-mm. That's another $500,000 for land acquisition.
Land acquisition.
And you only have one shot at it, and it would be due, your waiver was only through this September, so.
But if I understood before, if it's development of property, then it's a 25-year.
Yeah, but that one's for land acquisition only.
No, I understand. I'm trying to keep straight and help everybody. There's acquisition and there's development. You can decide not to take help on the acquisition, and you can still take help on development, and the development is generally a 25-year.
Varies by grant.
It varies by grant, but the acquisition part is the in perpetuity, which is what is the concern.
let me ask, this is on the entire
Both parcels.
parcel, the entire thing, not 50 foot, or we're talking.
And the other grant we were talking about, was that just for the 50-foot right away to the emergency access?
Yes, sir.
So that grant would only be for that one section of the property?
But you did have deed restrictions on that one that you accepted last month. It was on 5 and 6 that I put, yeah.
All right, that's good. Got a motion?
Got a second?
I believe the motion was to go forward, and there's a second to go forward. My motion died. My motion, okay,
That is correct. We have a motion and a second to move forward. We're in discussion. If we don't hear any more discussion, we're gonna call for the question and the vote. You ready? All in favor of the motion, say aye.
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 Opposed, say no.
No.
All right, for the record, it's 3-2. The doctor and Mr. Brown are supporting the motion. The other three are opposed. All right,
It's a lot of work, Christie, thank you.
So can I get an answer to my follow-up question? Does the board want me to
Re-
put
yeah.
in an application for Land and Water Conservation Fund and
It's in perpetuity. It's the same value, it's another 500,000. That's the value for that.
what was the answer to the question?
I'm not sure that I got one.
Unless we're directed to apply for it, we're not going to spend any more time on the grant that's getting ready to drop.
That's just to apply for the one from the coastal management.
No, that's
No,
the
this is-
land and water that's the federal money that's getting ready to drop at another $500,000. So unless the board will direct the staff to apply for that, we're not going to engage on that effort.
It has the same strings attached.
Typically, all land acquisition, I haven't read the document yet, but typically all land acquisition does. Yeah, grants for land acquisition.
Anybody want to make a motion to ask the staff to move ahead? If we're not, we're going to move ahead on the agenda.
Okay, so the next grant before you is the North Carolina Public Beach and Coastal Waterfront Access Grant. This is for a total project cost estimate of $63,535, of which the town would be responsible for $15,884. It is to develop a Hatteras Ramp and a walkway on the 50-foot lot only. It's through DCM, which you got your acquisition for in the amount of $180,000 and a little extra last month. It's this year's round of grant applications for development. And I have to thank Tim because he was the person in charge of the budget for construction. So we worked together on this grant.
Christie, can you, I've looked and tried, is the Hatteras Ramp basically just gravel over the, what is it?
I'm on,
Depending on how you want to do it.
No.
First time ever. The Hatteras Ramp is basically made up of either chains or ropes connecting timbers together so that you have something to drive over. And it can be maintained by pulling it up or just replacing it. And that's just a term that's used for that type of construction. It won't be gravel, not in the dunes, but you can put a Hatteras Ramp there that I just described. Or you can simply have a crossover over that dune where you maintain the sand. Hatteras Ramps makes it more easily to travel over.
So any bulldozer and whatever can get out, anything can go over.
That's right. I estimated it at the width of a good-sized bulldozer blade is what I estimated the width of it for.
And this stays out all the time except during storms?
Yeah, it can be brought in during storms, but typically what happens is they end up getting covered up. They will, if they do, because they're connected and they're loose fitting, they can be taken up and removed. They can be rolled up and taken up and moved, or they simply don't become a hazard because there just won't be an obstruction. Water will pass through them. They'll move out of the way. They'll float, that kind of thing.
Okay, wood and chain in a marine environment is always going to degrade. And this is for the heaviest equipment, I take it. Because, again, I keep thinking of the access being, our access has generally been for light and medium weight vehicles. It's only when we're doing construction on the beach that we've got the really heavy stuff there.
Well, once again, if you choose not to go with the Hatteras Ramp, then you can just simply install a ramp. Well, I understand your like for mats, but I don't think mats are going to work for a beach access for vehicles to drive over. I think that you will, and this grant also includes an actual walkway access that's handicapped at the same location. The mats work well, the Moby mats work well where you can get them approved, or where we approve them, but I wouldn't use it for, I don't think I would use Moby mats to, people may be doing it, but I don't see how it would be functional.
Moby Mat has actually, they have developed a 10-foot wide that is for light and medium weight vehicles. I'm just playing devil's advocate on the options that may be available, and have they all been evaluated for the type of traffic that we need them for?
I was asked to evaluate for a Hatteras Ramp, and that's what I did.
I will tell you that the Moby mats, I would not bank all your investment in any of the, either Moby mat is a brand or any of our blue mats, because just last summer, the CRC had an interpretation because of a couple of sea turtle incidents, that there was a possibility that they were going to make every beach community remove those mats every night and put them back every morning, and that did not flow. But I think if we're going to look at actually doing some development on this, that we don't want to sink all of our thought process of what we're going to do in the mats. And also, the only thing is, if the board does decide you want to go that direction, we don't have time to turn this grant application around, so we would be null and void for this year because it's due the 22nd.
We had chosen the Hatteras Ramp type of ramp because those are permitted on a frequent basis. The folks at DCM are very familiar with that type of construction, and, you know, given their the number and types and kinds up on the northern part of the state, thought that was, especially in light of the feedback on the Moby mats, that was probably the most prudent choice to go with. It's more easily permittable.
What's their lifespan? Good 10, 20 years?
Just like any other wooden walkway that we have.
You know, how it weathers, it depends on the products and the quality of the products you use. That depends. But at the same time, they can be maintained. You can maintain them, you can change them. You can either use chains, you can use ropes. There's several different ways they've been established. People have been using the Hatteras Ramp and Hatteras walkways for a long, long time. Even when I was a little boy, I remember. And they work. I'm going to tell you, if you're asking me from a planning standpoint, these Mobley mats, while they all sound wonderful, they're sort of like our walkways that we used to have that went all the way out to the water. Everybody loves them and everybody wants them, but nobody wants to be required to do them when the storm comes along and they all end up in Oak Island. So until they've started allowing those things on a regular basis and there gets to be enough of them out there, we won't know what the effects of Mobley mats are during a storm. But I have seen the effects on some of them, what happens during storms.
I know what happens to them, because one of ours, the end unit, washed away because we had a storm that got worse than it was supposed to, and 3 months later, it was found on the end of the beach, and it was brought back to us, and it's down there again because it survived very well. I can't say that.
But it spent a lot of time out there in the waterway with the aquatic animals, and you don't know what kind of damage it did out there. And that's the idea, is to keep the water clean and the environment clean.
I will say that this is your pre-app. So what would happen is this would go in, and if DCM invites the town to do a final application, that would be due, it's a little more robust, in the August timeframe. So this one kind of says, here we are, and this is what we're proposing, and then we have to put something else together if we're invited to do something back.
I'd just like to go ahead and make a motion in for the town manager to go ahead and get the grant prepared, get the paperwork ready, and submit it to the Division of Coastal Management.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Discussion. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say no. It's unanimous, Madam Clerk. Ms. Ferguson?
Yes, sir, I like it so good, I'd like another round. Can I stay here?
Yes, ma'am. Finish that page for us.
All right. So what used to be earmarks are now congressionally directed spending. We were contacted several weeks ago by Warden Smith, who apprised us that there were going to be some project availability if we had shovel-ready projects that we knew we could put together applications for. The paperwork came out late last Tuesday. The grants were put together between Tuesday evening and Friday to go in the agenda packet. What you have here is the main concepts with the letters. There's 3 projects. It's requesting funding for the coastal storm risk management for our beachfront study with the Corps. Those do not have forms included because the Corps has to do their own forms. We just have to send the letters of support. There's also a letter for stormwater that we did not get approved for last year to fix on the Boulevard with a stormwater issue. And there's a sewer lift station upgrade. If you guys receive funding for either of these projects, you know the cost share for your coastal storm risk management already is a 50-50 match, so it's the $800,000 that's proposed in this coming year's budget. But the others would be a 25% match, so they would be picking up 75% of the cost. We have had a little bit of, with it coming so late and the Easter holiday on Warden Smith's end, we have had a little bit of back and forth with forms to tighten up some technical language. So what you're really approving is the letters to go in. The forms have some minute changes, but they're not in terms of money or funds. They're just, basically you guys have to send a letter of support if you want to be considered for this, and they're due tomorrow.
Can we have just a little description of the scope of the stormwater project, the $1 million stormwater project?
It's the same estimate that we used previously. It's not founded on any specific design. We had to come up with a number, and it's the same estimate that we used previously.
So we're just asking for
For Congressman Rouser, Senators Burr and Tillis to list these projects in their project list for congressional delegated spending. Their project list should come out in May. Just because they include it doesn't mean that the appropriations committees will fund it, but we should find that out in September timeframe.
Motion to send letters of support to the congressional delegation for the attached three projects.
I'll second that.
All right, Ms. Pat, Mr. Smith made second the motion. Discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say no. It's unanimous.
Thank you.
Are you finished, Miss?
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you for your hard work. All right, we're on number 13, page 2 of the agenda. Mr. Green?
Yes, sir. As the commissioners are aware, I transmitted a proposed offer to purchase the contract vacant land purchased from Holden Beach Enterprises Incorporated, and the substance of the offer, this is for Block Q, map 4, book 4, page 2, and the substance of the offer is on page 14 of the contract. So first is Exhibit 1, again, map 4, page 2, Block Q, Brunswick County Registry. And then it lists the numbers, the parcel numbers, as well as the lot numbers. So you have lots 1 through 8, and parcel numbers 232NF01 through 232NF08. Plus there's one unnumbered lot, which is parcel number 232NF029. And that lot is north of Lot 7. Exhibit 2 details purchase price of $2,200,000. Seller would give $200,000 to the buyer, making the reduced purchase price $2 million. I contacted Mark Richardson this afternoon. He's a well-known tax attorney in Charlotte, and I'm going to send this contract to him. I told him whether there was an issue if the buyer, if the purchase price is $2,200,000, the seller then gives the town of Holden Beach $200,000. I said, Mark, we just want your expertise to tell us that the board is not bound in any way to support that donation, that certainly we will accept $200,000. But insofar as our involvement, we have no involvement except to see the reduced price, the $200,000 reduced price. said, I just want your opinion. I said, I have my opinion, but I don't hold the credentials that he does as far as being an expert tax attorney. As far as I can tell, the matter between Holden Beach Enterprises and the Internal Revenue Service, and the Internal Revenue Service requires a bona fide appraisal to show that the property is in fact worth at or above the price of $2,200,000. And my understanding of Doug Baxter with the Holden Beach Enterprises, in fact, does have that appraisal. Saw Doug today, spoke to me about, is the board on track for this purchase. I said, as far as I know, the board is, but, the board will take a final vote as to whether we move forward with this contract. Buyer would pay $1 million to the seller at the closing, so the contract does not, as I wrote it, doesn't have a closing date. So I would say that the board and the town manager arrive at a closing date, and we would put up $1 million at closing, and the remaining balance of $1 million would be financed by the seller over 3 years in equal amount payments of interest on the unpaid principal balance at the rate of 3.18%, which is what we asked the seller to approve. And that, as you know, is the interest rate for the pier purchase. It's back on the interest rate. So that essentially is the contract. And I'm going to tell you one piece of information I picked up today. First of all, the title search on this is mammoth, because it goes back all the way to the time of Jim Griffith and Joe and Virgil signed over all the properties that were owned by Holden Beach. I can't really remember the name of it.
Realty
Yes.
Corporation.
Yes. They transferred their property over to Holden Beach Enterprises, and that's a long, long time ago. So the title search became from that point on. You need 30 years for a valid title search. That title search is probably going to be finished this week. I'm not suggesting, I don't want it closed until I've seen that title search. But in connection with that title search, we received notice from the Brunswick County Tax Office that there is a garnishment of proceeds levied against Holden Beach Enterprises in the amount of $30,847.64. That does not come out of Holden Beach money. That comes out of the proceeds from this closing benefiting Holden Beach Enterprises. Now, that quote is good until the end of April. Again, but it's of no concern to the town. It's a possible concern to Holden Beach Enterprises, but that's going to have to come off whatever money we pay Holden Beach Enterprises. It has to be paid to county revenue, $30,000. So they're going to come up. They don't know this, but they're going to come up $30,847.64 shorter than they would have had there not been a garnishment. And there's nothing for us to do about that except I wanted everybody to be aware of it. So that's where we are.
That doesn't affect what we pay them. They pay it out of their proceeds.
That's correct. That's correct. We pay nothing on this garnishment, but we're not going to close until part of the deal, the garnishment is paid, because we purchased the property that we inherited the garnishment.
Do we need to get a survey before we close? Would that be prudent?
I think, honestly, I think you're okay with the maps that we have. The lots are identified with that one exception, which is that little...
The sliver.
Yeah, but you can identify it from the map, even though it doesn't have a number, a lot number, but it does have a county parcel number, and all the other lots have county parcel numbers. So
no issue, in my opinion, with what we are buying. We can go buy those maps and buy those lot numbers, and as to that triangular piece, the county revenue parcel. So we're good there.
How long do you think it'll take to get the deed search complete, Mr. Green?
Well,
You said you don't want to close,
I don't
or
want to close.
propose a closing date until that's done.
Yeah, I think May 1st. Mr. Hewitt, I think it suggested possibly May 1st. David, is that correct?
I've just pulled that.
Okay. I think May 1st is reasonable, but again, I'm not going to close this until such time as that title search is completed. Do I think that there's anything wrong? No, I don't. But I didn't know that there was a $30,847 garnishment either until this afternoon. So it doesn't have to do with the title or ownership by Holden Beach Enterprises. It's just it's their debt on all of their properties, not just this property here. So any transfer of money is going to require that amount of money paid to the tax office. We'll do that in connection with the closing. It's not unusual that happens. Seller oftentimes is not real happy about that, but that's not my problem.
So, in essence, the step we need to take is decide a potential closing date, approve this so that it can be provided to the seller for them to accept, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And you're suggesting that May 1st is, I don't want to go through another peer property that we kept coming up against a closing date and had to push it back. So that's the only reason. I'd like it to be done by May 1st. If it's not going to cause a problem, in which case the seller is going to have to come back to us pretty quickly and accept this.
I mean, I think that's a reasonable assessment. I mean, I think everyone I've ever spoken to says, sooner the better, so we get the parking out of the way. I would say anything between May the 1st and whenever people start coming across the bridge for the parking spaces, would be reasonable. If those parking spaces can be made available, we're running up into some slight time pressure, but I mean, I'll close it anytime the town council is closed, and assuming that $1 million is spread. Am I right?
There's a budget amendment attached to this for $1 million that you'd have to adopt simultaneously in order to move forward.
May 15th, May 1st.
Do you think it can be May 1st? Make it May 1st?
That's what I think there's, they need to wait.
What day is May 1st? Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday?
I didn't any of it.
Let's make sure it's not on a Saturday or Sunday.
It's a Sunday. It is a Sunday. It is a Sunday.
I told you I just.
No, can I remember?
Well, May 2's looking pretty good now.
May 2nd looks great, right?
Oh, I don't know. David, I think this is it. I got it on. Oh, that.
Okay, where are we, Mr. Hewitt?
In addition, I think there's $1 million budget amendment in front of you for the down payment, and we ran an actuary table just so it's spelled out. The annual payment for the second, third, and fourth years is $349,927.20. So that's what the math on the rest of the $1 million at 318 gets you. So it's right at $350,000 a year.
Let me ask you this, on what date would that be paid? I had it.
I was just using the logic, the year from whenever the closing date that was arbitrarily made. So those are full years.
That's what I was using,
Yeah.
each anniversary date after the closing
Yes,
date.
Right.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Then can we agree that closing will be May 2nd? That this will be delivered, and we give him a timeline to respond on so that the town manager knows that it's accepted in time to arrange
Oh, yeah.
payment?
I'll communicate this, if the board votes and agrees on May the 2nd as the closing date, then I'll amend the contract to show May the 2nd closing date. Communicate with Doug Baxter tomorrow morning and send the contract up to him. And he will turn, I'm sure, will contact Joe Taylor, and Joe does, well, actually, Joe will talk to Kenny Griffin and Carolyn Roberts. So I don't think there's going to be much of a holdup. I don't.
Okay.
I can't predict about this garnishment, how that's going to go over. They don't know it. They don't know it.
They owe $30,000, they know it.
I think they,
I'd know it if I owed it. So.
I agree, but
I move that we approve the contract as has been discussed with the terms and a closing date of May 2nd, and that we approve ordinance 2210, an ordinance amending the revenues and appropriation ordinance for fiscal year 2021-22, amendment number 15.
Motion made, is there a second?
I'll second that.
Mr. Smith, second, Ms. Pat's motion. Looking for discussion. Any discussion, please?
Mr. Smith, are you prepared to sign the contract on behalf of the town so that I can transmit it, the signed copy?
Yes, sir.
Why, the mayor's not involved in the transaction, why would the pro tem sign it instead of the mayor?
Well, the mayor could sign it as well, sure.
I think Mr. Green was trying to
Oh, I'm sorry.
keep my name from being in the papers and making $1 million or $2. Mr. Green, I greatly
Once again, I
appreciate
stand corrected.
Well,
I'm happy for Mr. Smith to do a good job.
that may have subconsciously been my, yeah.
Thank you. Okay, we got a motion and a second, and ready to vote, right? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, anyone?
Aye.
You opposed? Mr. Brown is in opposition to the motion. 4-1. All righty. Anything else before we move on?
We'll get 5 minutes recess, please.
5-minute recess. Let's come to order, please. Okay, let's continue with item number 14. Public Works spokesperson is,
I'll take that one.
you got that one, Mr. Hewitt? All right.
Yes, sir. This item is the ARPA funding for the spring round. Green Engineering, on behalf of the town, intends to apply for grant funding for the work planned on Pump Station 2. This grant funding is basically in the form of a no-interest loan, is what it is. and based on our cost estimates that we took bids on in the past. In order to proceed with the application, there's a couple of requirements that we have to have current, and that would necessitate an updating of the capital improvement plan that goes, that includes 10 years of possible projects, and also the resolution approving the application for the funding. This capital improvement plan is only for the water and sewer plan, and it is a required component. That's not to say that we won't re-amend the capital improvement plan coincidental with our budget cycle, but because of the timing on the way these grants come down, we find ourselves having to propose a capital improvement plan that's been prepared pretty much by Mr. Clemens. And as opposed to the boards, we're applying for two funding streams for that lift station. The federal 75-25 split, if that washes out, this is state money that we're applying for on this. So it's the same project, but we're looking for two different sources of money on.
So we're doing an either, if we get the federal, we don't proceed with
It's a
this.
better deal with the feds because
Right.
they pick up 75%.
Right. But if that doesn't come, we can
And-
have this in and we,
Yes, ma'am.
now.
Which is
David, do we have to
no
have-
interest loan
No,
is
no,
is
no, I
the grant
understand.
is. You still have to pay it back.
Yeah, we still have to pay, and you said the amount that we previously asked.
That estimate was like 3.3. It's whatever the bid that came in on. Remember, it was too high to go forward and go for borrowed funds. So that's the estimate that we're using in applying for it, because that's pretty market trued, and as best we could get done in a short amount of time without actually going out for bids.
Is there gonna be a need to have another bid put out for that work before we can actually receive any of these grants or any of this funding?
Well, yes. I mean, before you go to award a contract, you have to bid it out. But this will suffice to go through the process of getting our name in the hat for consideration on a no-cost loan. Otherwise, those two avenues fail, where you're going to be is back at the local government commission to borrow money on the lift station 2 upfit.
And David, I understand that the projected cost based on last year was 3.3 million roughly. However, we did borrow the money back against lift station 3, so our water sewer isn't sitting at almost nothing now. Is it necessary to borrow the full amount?
I think it is, but
Why?
based on the fact that your ratios were deemed to be low compared to others. Remember when the
Yeah.
board had to sign that out, and I don't know. We haven't seen the end of the audit year yet. I may stand to be corrected. We'll have to see that and assess it at the end of this year. But based on the fact that we've already gotten the local government commission's attention regarding the profitability of our water sewer fund, that would be my recommendation to apply for the full grant at this point in time.
We're putting a lot of debt on the town, and that's payments by our people to pay even a zero-interest debt. That's why I'm asking. I'm not saying let the water sewer go down to the level it got down to, because that was quite low. But if it's a 3.3 million estimate, can we borrow 2 instead of 3.3 and still leave ourselves? Where is that number?
I agree that math has to be gone through as a
Right.
prudent measure in evaluating exactly how to finance the upfit, which the board has committed to doing. I'm telling you, I'm not gonna sell myself short on saying we only gotta borrow $2 million without the numbers, the end-of-year numbers being in order to, do that rack and stack at this point in time.
Okay. Is there any concern about this one clause about the applicant agrees to include in the loan agreement a provision authorizing the state treasurer upon failure of the government to make scheduled repayment of the loan, or is that just a standard?
The state treasurer could come in at any time and take the town's finances over.
Right.
It's standard boilerplate.
That's just a standard statement.
Mhm. As a matter of fact, the Fiscal Control Act requires that debt service be the first appropriation in the budget.
Any more discussion? Is there a motion? Is there a motion? All right,
That was just,
hearing none.
wait a minute, hold on a second.
This is an either, we just explained, it's an either or. If we don't get the credit,
This-
this is a fallback, it's a 0% loan. So we need a motion to proceed on the front.
Motion to approve the updated capital improvement plan and adopt resolution 2226.
The doctor's made the motion, is there a second?
I'll second the motion.
Mr. Smith seconded. Let's try again for some more discussion.
At some point in time, the sooner the better, we need to make that improvement to that pumping station. It's an important part of the
Absolutely.
sewer system here. It's got to be done.
We were all in hopes it'd go down, but I think it's, no.
Construction costs, yeah, not the pump station cost. Yeah.
We don't have any estimations of it ain't going back.
We do have some of it, but
Any more discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. It's unanimous, Madam Clerk. Mr. Hewitt, number 15.
Yes, sir. This is the reciprocal to the budget amendment that y'all approved last month for the purchase of or transfer of funds from the sewer capital reserve fund over to the operational water and sewer fund for the purchase of valve pits. We need to do the same thing on the water side from the water capital reserve fund to fund the purchase of new water meters. Those are two specific examples of exactly why the system development fee was established. The town has collected those revenues already, but since you can't make expenditures from capital reserve fund, we have to move the money back over into the operational account, and that requires the budget amendment amendment number 16 in the amount of $16,775.
This is to purchase
Water meters.
water meters,
Due to new construction.
new ones.
We've got new customers out there that need water.
It's an expansion of the system.
I move to approve budget ordinance 2211, amendment number 16.
second.
Motion made by Ms. Pat. Mr. Devine, second. Discussion. Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. It's unanimously passed. Ms. Pat, number 16.
Yes, the board objectives, thank you, everybody, for feeding in at the last minute to Heather so that she could add them up. I'm going to simply propose that, as we did last year, and I believe the year before, that we consider everything with a point total above 14 to be a board objective for the upcoming fiscal year. 14 is a number that represents at least 2 of the 6 people who assign a value, having said it is a must-have. That will mean if you talk about not the evergreens, which are just part of doing business, there will be five activities with 18, which is the top number, 1 with 17, 4 with 16, 3 with 15, 2 with 14. And then that will be the list we worked from this year to try to make it all happen. So I would move that we make our objectives for the upcoming fiscal year, everything with a point total of 14 and above.
That's a motion.
That's a motion.
Looking for a second.
Second.
Have a second from Mr. Brian Murdoch. Discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. It's unanimously passed. Public comments. Anybody wants to talk about anything you want to talk about? If you recognize, yes, ma'am. If you come to the podium and give us your name and address, we're happy to have you speak.
My name is Terry Huffstetler, 163 OBW and 119 Sunshine Lane. First, let me talk to you like this, because this is what we see or don't see when we get to come hear you over the radio, hear you through Facebook. And it'd be really nice not to see a cardboard cutout of our logo. I don't understand why we can't see you guys to listen to you. 25 people, and I'm trying to listen to you. Sir, I have no idea who you are, because I was listening today on this. I couldn't hear a word you were saying, and nor do I have a clue as to what you're talking about. But I want to know. This is a calm, small group. I know what it was like when it was a little testy back in the day. But I don't understand why today, in 2022, we have monies to spend. We cannot invest in some kind of camera that sits here or talks to you guys. Mr. Murdoch, with all due respect, you mumble. We can't hear you. And I don't mean to say that, but we can't. Pat, I hear you loud and clear. Some of you guys, I cannot hear. And I'm not the only one. You look at the numbers back here. I just don't understand why we can't invest in, I don't know a dollar amount, 5,000, 500, but why can we not do any better than a phone sitting at a logo? It's 2022, people. Let us be heard and not fall on deaf ears, as I hope I will not fall on deaf ears to you, because I'm the only one here speaking about this. But I can go around and get a lot of other people to come sit with me if you want, but I don't know that that's really necessary. All I ask is that we put that somewhere on the agenda so that we can all listen to all the great work that you're doing. But I want to be a part of it, and I can't always be right here. So that's all I have to say, and I appreciate what you do. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Just so you know, it is one of the objectives that is above the 14-point cut to improve the audio and reliability of broadcast meetings.
I saw, yes, ma'am.
I'm Marty Arrowwood, 114 Shrimp Street. First of all, Ms. Ferguson, thank you so much for the grants and the writing and the time. I was in education. I'm a retired teacher, and they are no fun. Well, that's about the only funding we got sometimes. I take another perspective on the pier, and I just want to throw this out. I looked at the whole argument over the purchase of the pier property as trying to buy land, a park, for perpetuity. That this was going to be something that we were going to have, that it was going to be for the people of the island and off the island to be able to come. And if is a huge word. I've been here 33 years, and I have never seen our town commissioners get in any kind of financial difficulty with our town's money. We were ever desperate. I've never seen it. So to say if, versus we have these opportunities, one of the biggest arguments for buying the property was it was too expensive. we have these opportunities out there to be able to mitigate some of that cost, and we're going if. When I look at it as a national park, I look at it as a national forest, I look at it as a land trust, that we are investing in the future of Holden Beach, that my great-great-grandchildren will know there's a block of land on the ocean front that will always be there for them. I didn't look at it when we bought it as saying, okay, we've got a good deal, and if 10 years from now or if 15 years from now, we can sell it and make a huge profit. I looked at it as us acquiring it with the idea we would never get rid of it, we would improve it, and it would be there forever, because there isn't going to be any other oceanfront land that I know of on this island that we can look at and say forever. So I know the word perpetuity is a scary, scary thing, but I also know we've got the Great Smoky Mountains out there in perpetuity, and it is the largest visited park in America because it's in perpetuity and nothing that can ever happen to it. And I don't know about the other islands, but I would like to know that there is a parcel of land on the ocean front that will always be green space for the people of this area. So I look at it a little bit different. It doesn't scare me like I think it scares you guys, because I haven't seen in 33 years our commissioners ever get in a situation where we were desperate to find money someplace to have to do something. So I kind of take it as from another angle. And I look at it as a way of, with the hard work they have done, to mitigate some of the I don't even know what word, some of the hatred, or what the word is, to say for the purchase of the land, it's going to raise our taxes, it's too much money, it's this, that, and the other. Now we're kind of turning it away on a piece of land that we could have for the next 100 years that's always green. Thank you.
Thank you. Did I see another hand? Yes, sir.
I'm Rick Parpus, 140 Tarpon Drive. With regard to this grant, I think it's important that we hash out all the specifics of what the obligations and encumbrances are that comes with these grants. Pat has sent me a little more information that needs to be considered within these part-if grants. And I'm not going to say I've interpreted it correctly, but some of the things I noted in the stuff that you sent me was that adding facilities and uses other than for public recreation is considered a conversion. So if you rent that building to a dentist, that's not public recreation, so it may limit the types of tenants you have. Discontinuation of the recreation, public recreation, prior to the end of a 25-year period is a conversion. Again, so you may be liable. So what happens if the pier gets destroyed? Okay, we'd have to discontinue that recreation, or may have to move really fast to rebuild it. And I'm not saying these things are bad. I'm just saying we need to understand with eyes open what we're getting into. For any of the grants, this information can be known, and we need to know these specifics so that when we make those commitments, we know about it. Like the lady was saying, if we want to go do that for perpetuity, we need to know that. I don't know if you knew that about Bridgeview Park, but I think it's vital that we understand what our obligations are. And, you know, the obligations are for all the people here. So it's not the ones that you bear. We all bear it together. Thanks.
Thank you. Anybody else want to speak? Okay. Thank you all for your comments, and we'll look to the town manager for his report.
Yes, sir. I will endeavor to be quick. Wanted to provide an update on our FEMA project that just recently completed dredging operations. That beach fill placement is complete with in excess of the contracted amount of 1.51 million cubic yards being put on the beach. We had to stop short of the full length of the template fill due to turtle takes and some incompatible material being put on the beach at the very end. It is my understanding of how longshore drift works that the people to the west of 700 block down to 800 longshore drift should fill that in within 4, 6, 8 weeks, so that sand motor that we've got on the east end will keep delivering sand on down the beach to the west. Demobilization is currently underway. All the shore pipe is stacked and racked, ready to get picked up probably Thursday of this week. Beach tilling has begun. That is an environmental requirement, along with picking up rocks with a beach sweeper. So that will probably, all that's got to be done before the 1st of May. On the issue of sand fence and vegetation installation, which is also part of the FEMA storm damage repairs, that began on Friday with 100 plants in the ground and looking like they'll be able to get 50,000 plants per day over the next week. Generally speaking, I want to talk about the geometry of how the sand fence will work. It will be extended from the seaward end of the existing fences, with vegetation being planted mechanically in longshore rows that'll vary in width between 30 and 50 feet wide, adjacent to the seaward end of the new fence, and then hand planted once we get past the 1st of May environmental window in and amongst the existing dunes in the more sparse locations. There will be variations in the fence and the planting geometry based on the berm's profile, because that thing does snake somewhat back and forth, based on the berm's profile, damage and repair to the existing fence, and also backfill of the existing plants. On the finance side, I want to make sure that everyone understands, I'm pleased to report that we received the first large reimbursement of our special obligation payback money yesterday of $7.6 million. That in effect repays our first draw of the bond money. We're waiting on the second draw reimbursement, so we can subsequently pay that back to PNC, and then once we get the bill on the third draw for the work that's just completed. No, we actually got that. We're waiting to make that payment. Once we've paid that third draw out to the Weeks Marine, then we'll hopefully demobilization will have finished. We'll have all the plantings in, and we can do the fourth and final draw, or at least for all the big 7-digit expenses, and wait on FEMA. And I want to point that out. The waiting on FEMA, we've really tried to be administratively proficient on getting the big bills in, doing the draws on the special obligation bond money, getting those bills paid and submitted to FEMA for reimbursement. But this first draw actually took paying back 8 weeks. I want to make it clear, and we've known this, that while that lag time is playing out, that interest clock is ticking on that. So we don't know how this is going to play out in terms of FEMA making the final reimbursement to us, because they withhold 25% of the total project cost until there's been a site inspection. And there have been historically here at Holden Beach anyway, that has lagged behind, and recent experience up in Topsail Beach, that also has held true. So the point that I'm trying to make is that interest clock is ticking, and we do not know, we do not have an answer back from the feds if the interest expense on the special obligation bond will be a reimbursable expense of the project subsidized by the FEMA project. We had not got an answer on that. The first interest payment that we made was $250,000 here a couple of weeks ago, and that money was expensed to the project. If we don't, if those expenses on the interest side are not approved as project expenses, it'll have to be made up from other town funds at an amount that I don't know what it will be until the time date certain on the reimbursement from FEMA comes back to us. So the lag time from the feds could be costing the town money, but I don't know that. Just want to make y'all aware of it. The Corps' Lockwood Folly Inlet Crossing Navigation Project, that has completed in time for the environmental window. We were able to make that 200,000 cubic yards well with the eastern end of our FEMA project, and make one really nice long beach. It was beach compatible sand. There were some rocks that they hit at the very end. Looks like that in addition to in the bin widener, they were really scraping the edges of the corners on that bin widener and got into an area that hadn't previously been dredged before, and just at the very tail end of the project, kind of like on our FEMA project, we ran into some incompatible material, but we've gotten that all cleaned up now, I believe. Wetland delineation, that draft has been prepared for the Ocean Boulevard property and the Marsh Streets, as I alluded to earlier. The Corps is here and going to be here, and we'll await those determinations before we move forward with doing any further engineering and permitting efforts for the parking lots layout there too. We did put a food truck request for proposals at the pier on the street today. They are due back the 6th of May for possible consideration by the Board of Commissioners at the regular May meeting. Seagull paving status, the contractor is trying to source his materials. Looks like our tentative timeline is to begin the surveying at the beginning of May, with the prep work through the second week of May, and paving still on schedule for paving before Memorial Day. Just a point to how that will work. Once that paving finishes and we have all of the final expenses in, then the board will rack and stack and apportion the final assessments that'll go out. That will not go out on the. We think that that'll probably, the assessment will probably go out after the turn of the new fiscal year. So basically, the way this works is that y'all are going to front the money and get the project done, and then you'll send out an assessment bill to recoup the revenue in a different fiscal year. So from what that will show in the audit is that whatever that project cost, that you didn't get the revenues in this fiscal year is what the most likely scenario is going to show. Ocean Boulevard bike lanes, new hot off the press information. Property owners along Ocean Boulevard received or should have received their CAMA notices from DOT about 10 days ago. We've had some questions on some of those details. The short version of it is that they're going to add 7 feet of asphalt to the south side of the existing pavement 3 feet to the north side of the existing pavement, recenter the travel lanes in the new pavement width, and have 2 5-foot bike lanes on either side of the road. So that's just a general description. Last week, the Department of Transportation presented a funding agreement to the town that basically increased the cost of the bike lane construction from a previous estimate of 1.6 to $2.1 million, which is a 30% increase, with the increase in funding being unknown source. We've worked with DOT and the GSATs to proof that new cost estimate, which has resulted in a revision back down to $1.73 million, which the delta is an increase of $116,000 that per the director of the Grand Strand Transportation Authority will be burden shared at a 80-20% split with the town, which the short version there is that'll cost about $23,000 more than we've currently programmed in our budget. GSATS is scrambling to get the formal approval of those details through the Transportation Coordinate Committee and the Transportation Advisory Committee. The agreement, the let date for that contract is going to be May the 23rd in order to get the funding in place and the agreement. I'll be bringing a budget amendment to the board at, Thursday's workshop to account for the programmatic changes and the increase in cost for your consideration. Additionally, when it goes to bid, if there's any increases in the cost of fuel or asphalt, any of those increases would also have to be reconciled at the end of the project. Speaking of the audit, that has already begun. We've provided the preliminary balances to our auditors. That team will be on site the last week in June. Suffice it to say, with all of these FEMA grant funds and other state monies going through the town or coming through the town's coffers, there will be a single point audit requirement this year due to those thresholds being exceeded in that protocol. Of note is the implementation of the GASB 87, which is going to impact the balance sheet. Undetermined how much at this point in time, but basically GASB 87 requires accounting for our capital leases so that, for example, our Vector truck is financed and if we owe $300,000 on it, that will be applied against our balance sheet so that it reflects future year obligations. The Board of Commissioners budget workshops are scheduled for the 21st of April, the 20th of May, and the 10th of June. And I forget those times, Heather. Do you have them?
I can tell you that Thursday is at 1.
Yeah, that's right. Okay. We'll get that to you. But that's all I have for tonight.
Any questions of our town manager? If not, we'll move to mayor's comments. Briefly, I was overwhelmingly impressed Easter Sunday morning with the crowd at the fishing pier. I don't know how many people were there, but there was a lot of cars from Water's Edge, condos to the general store down both sides of the boulevard, plus the pier parking lot was full and some side street parking in addition to that. So that was a good thing. And of course, we had a good crowd of people here. And I didn't hear of any major events that were negative or anybody getting hurt. So that made it even better. But one point that I want to address tonight I'm sure most of you are aware, but down in Harbor Acres, there is a survey discrepancy about where the street being Ocean Boulevard West, where the street is located, referencing the asphalt in the right-of-way. And that's been ongoing for as long as the town's been a town, as best I can remember. And it's causing problems with some of the houses on the second row there in Harbor Acres in regards to setbacks. And I would like to ask the staff, as we're working with DOT, to see if we can find out if the location of the asphalt, I know that they're going to work with the bike paths and the center line, but can we look at the possibility of them incorporating, correcting that problem down there? And I know I'll be glad to talk with anybody, that whoever's working with that DOT group, to see if we can address that. I know a lot of survey work's already done, but just to find out where the town stands. And I know that my construction company has had people inquiring about possibly building on the second row in this problem area, and wanted to address the setback question for those potential houses to be built. And with that, thank everybody for being here. And Mr. Rick Smith, what do you have tonight?
Mr. Mayor, thank you. I want to thank again our fine police staff. They've taken time to take on some of these golf cart issues, and that is appreciated, as well as working through all these the parking problems that have come up and seem to be able to be resolved easily. I thank Christie and their staff for working on these grants so hard. This was a, like Brian said, this was a tough one. That was a tough one, but we still have another shot at it. So it's not like it's gone forever. I want to thank Tim for helping me work through some of the stuff with some of the lighting ordinances that we're going to try to get on the agenda for next week, or next month. And it was really good during the grant meeting yesterday to hear all the positive feedback on the purchase of the pier. It kind of still reinforces the thought that this is what most of the folks here at Holden Beach want. Looking forward to the weekend. It should be a big weekend here at Holden Beach with the days at the docks. I know I have a lot of friends and family coming down, and I hope everybody stays safe, and thanks for all the people that showed up this evening to give their views. See you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Brown?
No comment.
Mr. Brian Murdoch?
I also want to thank everybody for their continuing hard work. I pray for a somewhat decent rollout on May the 1st of the parking. I also want to say I'm not a social media guy, and a lot. I get on there every now and then, but there's no doubt that the concern a lot of people have for the town of Holden Beach implementing paid parking. The best way I can summarize that is this board had a consensus to preserve a couple pieces of property that came at a great expense. And the residents of the town just couldn't bear to sustain that expense alone. So we did what we had to do, and we did this to provide, hopefully everybody, for a long, long time, a place to come and enjoy this beach. Unfortunately, it came at a price. And I urge everybody to take a step back, take a deep breath, and and just understand that we didn't want to charge anybody to come here. It was just a necessary evil. It was really the only choice that we had. But these properties will be here for you to enjoy, the residents to enjoy, anybody from here to California or from all over the world to come and enjoy, hopefully from now on. Also, with the acquisition of Block Q, we've gonna have a little boat trailer parking, although that also comes in as an expense. The wildlife, and correct me, I'm always wrong at this, they have between 9 and 15 spots that are free, but we will make some arrangements to try to accommodate some additional boat and trailer parking around Block Q, at least for this year. I was at the sunrise service, Alan, on Sunday, and that was a really, really great experience. It's something that hasn't been there in a couple years. I would venture to say there were 1,000 people there at a best guess, and I saw a smile on everybody's face. It was almost like a homecoming of sorts. The beach is crowded, people are getting out, the weather's getting better, and I hope everybody's attitude gets better. Fortunately for me, and to all you out there, I do have pretty thick skin, so I've mumbled all my life. I know you can't see me, and I am who I am, but I appreciate everybody's comments, good or bad, and I just want everybody to know that hopefully we, as a board, have done the right thing here at Holden Beach to secure some property for a long time to come.
Doctor?
I want to thank Christy and the staff. I know David worked hard. Everybody that's worked on those grants, I know that's a lot of work. Appreciate y'all doing that. I want to thank the police department. I know this weekend was tough on you guys. It was Easter holiday. You had a death in your group. Everybody worked hard. With the sunrise service, you see there's an increase in people. The tourist season has started. The festival this weekend with the nice weather, we're going to see an increase in people. I know the police department will be all on board with the road closures, everything we have to go through for that. Appreciate your hard work on that. I hope it's a safe weekend and everybody who's starting to come enjoy the beach can enjoy it. And with the tourist season and the paid parking going hand in hand, I think we'll have some bumps in the road, but I think it's a move in a positive direction.
Ms. Pat?
Obviously, I'd like to thank staff and the police department, but I'd also like to thank Richard, our town attorney, who's been hanging in there with one thing after another. And I'd like to thank him and the police department for meeting with someone to discuss handicap parking and to get, let's just say, a meeting of the minds and some cross-understanding of what's happening, how things have to happen. I think it's extremely valuable to use resources that are available. I'm looking forward to this weekend for the festival. I want to put a pitch in for the Holden Beach Beautification Club's plant sale, which is going to be this Friday and Saturday on Holden Beach Road at Brian's facility. But I understand that the plants are generally absolutely excellent. I have actually never been to one. I'm working it this year. But if you're a gardener, please do come out. The Beautification Club uses the money to help their various activities, some of which, of course, are keeping the public areas, many of the public areas here on Holden Beach, flowered up and beautifully landscaped and decorated.
All righty. Thank you for your comments. And on number 21 on the agenda, consideration of executive session, is there a motion?
Motion to go into executive session. Heather?
You want me to read it?
Yes, ma'am.
Executive session pursuant to North Carolina General Statute 143-318-11A6 to discuss qualifications, competence, performance of a public employee.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye. All right, ladies and gentlemen, those of you that are not required to be here, I appreciate your coming. Session, is there a motion?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Okay, you got that, Madam Clerk?
Yes.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
We're adjourned.